Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. And for now, we're going to deal with a very, very interesting subject. And that is why we should be speaking out more than we are in relation to politics, social issues, and so forth. But before I begin, I just encourage people to, if you're listening to this later on YouTube, please go down and hit subscribe so you can keep up on shows in the future in case you might miss them. And check out my website. I've got that linked down in the comment sections. And also, if you like science fiction, well, you know, something that has more of a dystopian feel to it, and you're into like bloodlines and some of the conspiracy theories and alternative history, then at least take a look and, look up my recent sci-fi book, The Destiny of Our Past. And just go ahead and Google that, The Destiny of Our Past. Anyway, now, on that issue, that very important issue, on why we should be speaking out more. Now, the reason why I was inspired to do this show was because I've been noticing something very interesting. And I've talked about this before, but I just want to repeat it. And that is a lot of internet forums. A lot of places where you keep, I'm not so much forums as in debate forums, but more like forums in which you have something on the bottom of a newspaper page that's online. A discussion where you can put your opinions down. Agree or disagree with the article or with people who are taking part in the discussion. I've noticed that a lot of publications are taking those down. And I think I know the reason for it. And that is something that has been called, I remember back in college at least, my professors called it the Dissident Effect. And with the Dissonant Effect, it kind of relates back to a whole bunch of social science experiments, social psychology experiments, actually, starting in, even as early as the late 1950s and going on until about the mid-1970s. And, you've probably heard about the Milgram experiments and the Zimbardo's experiments in regards to the Stanford prison study. And so forth. Milgram, of course, was the one who did the experiment with the authority and having people, they didn't know, actually, that they were not shocking a person whenever they gave a wrong response. They thought they were, and they were the ones being experimented on, not the guy in the other room. He was part of the experiment. And most of these people, they went ahead and went into the lethal range, even if a person was screaming or if they had pretended to pass out. But the other experiment that I think is quite interesting is the ones done by Solomon Asch. And in it, generally, the one that most people remember, is he would bring people in, and he would have them look at lines on a projection screen or on a chalkboard. And see, here was the deal. One person was the one who was being experimented on. He didn't know the other people were part of the study, and that he was the one being checked out. And what would happen is the guy would come in, and women too, would come in, sit down, and they'd be shown these lines, and they were expected to give a response, as in if line A and B were the same length, then, of course, line C, for instance, would be much longer or much shorter. And maybe the first person who would give a response would say that A and C were the same length. And then the other couple people would agree. And generally speaking, the person, by the time they got to him or her, and it was their turn to say which lines were equal, they could see that A and B were the same, and C was longer or shorter. But they would generally say it was A and C that were the same. And the reason for that was because of this idea that it's very uncomfortable to challenge the group. It's very you don't want to make an issue of things. Now maybe silently you're going, I can't believe this, A and B are the same length. But they'll publicly say it is A and C that are the same length. Now, when they did the studies, when they had the person write their answers down as well as state their opinion, they would, of course, write A and B are the same length. C is longer or shorter. But publicly, they may still say that it is A and C. Now, regardless of getting into all the lines and A, B, C, and that sort of thing, the thing that was really found was that if you allowed someone to challenge, so if one of the people that were working with the experiment would say, hey, I disagree with this, then the person that had been brought in would generally agree as well with the dissenter. But if there was no dissent, then they would just leave it, and not make a big fuss about it. And that's how society operates, actually, isn't it? There's a lot of things out there that are concepts that we don't want to challenge, and they just kind of become part of what we believe because, really deep down, they ingrain in us because they're repeated over and over, and they're so big, and you just assume that they have to be right. So you have people in one culture who will believe that this is what you eat for breakfast. In another one, they have a totally different idea what you should eat for breakfast. But each of them will look at the other funny because, those people eat that for breakfast, not realizing that most of our breakfast choices in modern society, at least in Western society, have been determined by corporations and ad campaigns and so forth. It has nothing to do with tradition. It had something to do with an ad campaign. And I noticed, there was this thing I was reading about in my social media about how Swedes, for instance, take their shoes off when they go into the house. And it may sound like, well, this is a tradition. Well, people believe it is a tradition. And if you ask them, when did the tradition start? Well, then they'll look at you like, well, I guess it's always been that way. In reality, it wasn't. It was part of it, from my understanding, it was part of an ad campaign that was put on by the government trying to get people to be all nice and comfortable in these kind of apartment buildings that were being built during the 1960s. But it became ingrained in the culture to the point now that, people would be uncomfortable if you walked in and with your shoes on in a Swedish house for the most part. And this is how values and ideas and opinions take shape and get integrated and then are no longer challengeable. But you see, the thing is this. If someone does challenge a long accepted notion of what is true, then people are less likely to adopt it. If a person stands up and says, no, I disagree with this, if it's a politician giving a presentation, then the amount of people who are in the audience who may be, fence sitters on the issue, the amount of people that will agree with the politician who's just given this nice, long, eloquent speech, prepared speech, will decrease in the amount that will agree with him or her. And there's where the dissonant effect is very, very, very important. Now, in our era, we have the internet. And, I would say that ultimately it is still a battleground between free speech and not having free speech. There's a lot of algorithms in social media that seem to filter out much of your reach in what you're saying or where it'll place you or so forth. And a lot of newspapers, I think, have gone the route of feeling like, well, they don't want to wait, they don't want to even accept that. Okay? Now, again, I don't want to discourage people. Actually, the social media is still very, very, very vital in reaching people. If, for instance, you've got a blog and you have a visitor counter, you've probably noticed that when you put something out on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or these kinds of resources, you will get traffic coming from there to your blog. Now, it may not be like it was in the old days, or all these fancy algorithms and so forth, but you're still getting a substantial number of people coming. So it is very important. But back to the newspaper. The newspaper, let's say it's a liberal newspaper, and they write an article criticizing, maybe it's part of the whole Trump and Russia thing. If you don't like Trump, attack him on his issues. Don't make stuff up about Russia, okay? People are getting so sick of that. I mean, I've heard of liberal friends of mine say, I don't watch the news anymore because all it is these false stories about Russia and Trump. And then the media, in kind of a feedback loop, the more they hear about it, the more they say, no, there's more evidence now. And there's no more evidence. There's no evidence. But they keep on feeding each other to the point, it's almost like the Salem witch trials when, so-and-so, I think I saw her walk outside at night. Suddenly turns into, I saw, Mary or whatever. I walked out, followed her into the woods, and she was having sex with Satan right there, with a circle of demons around her. In reality, the person saw this woman go out at night, maybe because she was trying to find her dog or something. But there's an embellishing. There's this and this and this and this and this, and it grows into this total hysteria. But again, if you're going to attack Trump, please do it on something that's really for real. All right. But let's say you got your liberal newspaper article, and it's attacking Trump on Russia, and someone says the things I just said. Well, it's been found in recent studies, actually, that the amount of people who actually will then agree with the article plummets. So in other words, this person who's gone to journalism school, going to journalism school just teaches you how to write an article, how to do it in such a way that it'll captivate attention, certain procedures you use, in news stories and stuff. It doesn't mean you go and spend 3 months learning about science and another 3 months learning about law and 3 months learning about this and this and this. Okay, a journalist learns about journalism. They're experts in how to write stories and so forth for a newspaper. Okay, everyone thinks, they must know what they're talking about. Yeah, like your favorite movie star who happens to play an astronaut in a science fiction movie obviously must know all there is to know about astrophysics, since they played a part where they were an expert in astrophysics. Okay, you see the point? The journalist is the same way. But we just accept that they must know what they're talking about. Well, anyway, they've got all these years of experience writing stories, and they're quite eloquent. They know how to use the English language and so forth. And they write their, long story that's mostly just wording things to where it makes it look like, something's happened. And then some teenager somewhere in Georgia or something, writes a response saying, well, I don't see any proof. Where's the proof? Why, and then they may take something and say, you're saying this when you don't have any evidence. That has really shot down. That in people's minds, because it's still written, the words are still written. People have this thing about, well, if something's printed and it's written, it gives it a certain legitimacy, even if it is just reader feedback. Psychologically, subconsciously, it still has legitimacy. So now your teenager in Georgia, they are now equal to this high-paid journalist somewhere, maybe in New York City or Los Angeles. And then if you start getting more and more people piling on, saying, oh, yeah, I read an article somewhere that said this, which totally counters what this journalist has just said in this article. And then someone else comes out and says, yeah, and I also noticed the person they interviewed happens to represent a firm that makes its money off of defense contracts, which means, of course, if you have peace break out between Russia and America, well, that means less defense contracts. So, they start using analysis and so forth. Well, basically now, your newspaper site, which is paid money to have that website, established and maintained, and relies on people coming into that site now. We don't go by subscriptions so much anymore, do we? It's how much traffic you get online that determines how much advertisers will spend. Well, the irony is, yes, people going there and debating, it brings revenue in because advertisers can say, oh, wow, look, there's this many people who've come to this site, and they have... And so forth. They don't know what they've said. They just know that they come to the site and they've read about this story. However, the amount of people, the newspaper realizes that every time they publish one of these articles, it's going to be shot down by the readers. So, what many of them are now doing is getting rid of reader commentary. And that is not because it's just hard to maintain. It's probably because of the idea of the dissonant effect. Because they understand that all of a sudden people are just not, buying into it anymore. See, in the old days, you had to write a letter to the editor to challenge something. Now, by the time, let's say you're challenging an article. Well, I remember that. You'd write in saying, the article that was published July 14th that was dealing with this, well, first of all, most people have forgotten about the article. Second of all, you're only reaching the people that are like really, really hardcore political junkies in the letters to the editor section. And, so it's not that easy to make that quick reply. Because now there's a disconnect between even the people that read it and you challenging it later. So the internet, because of discussion forums, allows immediate feedback. Quick, instantaneous. Within maybe just 30 minutes, you might have 75 to 100 people who have made a comment about the article, and maybe most of them are negative towards it. So therefore, it ruins the credibility. And if you don't think this is important, then why do governments around the Western world even, and not just the Western world, why are they employing internet trolls? Why are all the political organizations, well, I'm not going to say all the political organizations, but a lot of them out there that hire political trolls. And their job is to go through and give their idea of what is valid. And on top of that, my understanding is that Obama signed a law during his administration that made it legal to employ propaganda within the American sphere. Before, it was kind of illegal, although it did happen. It had to be done kind of secretly when you were using like the CIA or the FBI or whatever to try to, or the Pentagon, to try to influence opinion. and within the American public. Now it's, it's okay to do. So maybe that person that you're debating with online is actually someone you're paying through your tax money to have them actually debate you. But the thing is that you still should be out there. You need to be out there because we need people challenging the dominant paradigm in the society. And we see society pulling apart more and more and more. All right? You see the traditionalists, and I'm going to say traditionalists, and they don't even have to be Trump supporters, okay? They don't even have to be Trump supporters, but just people that are more traditional. The family is mom and dad and, kids and, this and here's our values and so forth. And then there's the ones who challenge those. And yes, most of those people are concentrated in the states that are more the urban, blue states, as they're called, the ones that go, Democrat pretty easy. Whereas the flyover region, which is the red states, most of those people live more of a suburban or rural, small city existence, and they tend to be far more conservative. And so they are, maybe being pulled this way, whereas the left is more pulled the other way. And because of the echo chamber effect of the internet, and this is true too even for the media, then you wind up in a situation in which you get more and more right and more left. Okay? And so I see that we're pulling apart as a society. And this has been going on since before Trump. Okay? This is a long-term process. But that makes it even more vital that people speak up and debate and comment. And yes, write blogs and do YouTube videos and these kinds of things. I'm really disappointed that I noticed that I have a lot of people in my social media. And sometimes they'll write saying, "Oh, I really enjoy your video." And they'll say, I wish I could reach people like you do." I say, "Why don't you?" "Well, it's probably too hard to. I don't know anything about editing a video or doing that kind of thing, or even setting up a YouTube channel or whatever." And I say, well, it's really easy, actually. First, you don't even have to edit a video. Okay? You can just leave it as is. Just turn the camera on or get in front of a computer and turn on the screen. Record it. And, from the heart. It doesn't have to be some super wonderful video. Okay? I've seen some videos out there that just some guy behind a steering wheel, or a woman behind a steering wheel, and they've set their little camera up there, and they just go into political discourse, and it could have like 10,000 views. Well, I want you to picture what 10,000 people looks like in a stadium or auditorium. Think about that. They went on there and they reached 10,000 people. Now, some of them are much more, some of them are much less. But even if it was 100, if you were able to speak in front of 100 people at some sort of rented hall somewhere, you see, it would actually cost you money to rent the hall. But you got 100 people show up to hear you give your opinion on your favorite subject. You'd feel pretty special about that, wouldn't you? But that is what creating videos on the internet enables you to do. You may reach 12 people. Okay, well, that's 12 people you just reached. You may reach 12,000. Well, that's a huge, huge audience. You may even go viral and reach even more. I've got some videos that are over 100,000. Okay? And whereas it may not be anything compared to if I don't know, Katy Perry or Miley Cyrus puts a video out there or something like that. When it comes to politics or dealing with psychology and society and that sort of thing, it's pretty good. And, you know, again, you're reaching a very large audience of people. A blog can do the same thing. My suggestion, I've told people that I see people write stuff in, like, for instance, Facebook. And they'll write something that's like a 400-word post. And then I write back to them and say, why don't you just make a blog and put what you wrote there on your blog? And then it's out there, and long after it's died in Facebook feed, whatever, you know, I mean, after a while, it's like so pushed, you know, like so last year's post or something like that. But a blog, it could still be out there reaching people, especially if you were to link your article, like someone starts a big discussion about, well, anything. And you've written a blog about that, blog article about it. Let's say they're talking about, I'm just trying to think of a good issue here. Let's say they're talking about sex trafficking. Okay? I mean, I know Trump's been really doing... Obama did some good stuff against sex trafficking. I know Trump has been following and then going even further in trying to curtail the stuff. But let's say someone makes a post about sex trafficking, and you've written a nice long blog article about what you've discovered in researching the issue. Then you could say, yes, I totally agree with you, and then put a link to your blog. Well, that means now you get traffic to your blog, and people can read more about your perspective, far more in depth than if you were to sit there and write 500 words in your response, which is going to take you a couple hours. And then let's say 2 weeks later, someone else writes about the subject. Well, you're going to write your 500 words again? When you could just have it linked to something that talks about what your perspective is on the issue? We have to stand up more. Okay? You're up against a lot of big people. You got the corporations. Now, I don't like to paint the corporations as this big, dark entity. But there's a lot of corporate interest out there that has an agenda. And they want it promoted. And they have advertising budgets. There's special interest groups. Again, massive. Maybe getting funding from corporations or big donors. And they're able to reach a lot of people. You've seen these videos on YouTube, you know, a lot of them. Really glitzy, wonderful, high-quality videos. And they're propaganda. They're trying to get you to feel a certain way. And they are glitzy, and they get a lot of views. Maybe your little video that you turn out, it doesn't get nearly as many views. But what if 1,000 people listening to this right now were to do the same thing? I'm sure most of you, you know, on most issues, if you're into alternative media and stuff, you probably agree on maybe all of you out there listening right now, 80-90% of issues you agree with each other. Well, if 1,000 of you suddenly put things out there, blogs, YouTube videos, and so forth, you're going to more than counter that. And you're going to have not just this little propaganda glitzy piece, but you're going to have something that's going to be more authentic. People, especially millennials, okay? Everyone trashes millennials. There's no need to do that. Millennials have gotten a really bad rap. Now, I have talked about millennials, saying that a lot of millennials have not settled down. And I understand why. If you're working at a coffee shop, it's a little difficult to start thinking home and family and a long-term relationship maybe, or something like that. But then again, if you look back in time, maybe your great-grandparents were kind of in the same boat. And they still, I'm not going to get into the whole marriage and, people should like take a leap of faith and start families and that sort of thing, because I've dealt with that and I'm going to deal with it in the future. But the thing is, millennials have gotten even more tired of glitzy propaganda pieces that look like something from an ad agency. Because you know what? They're already, those formats, those videos you see, the twisting of politicians' words, regardless if they're right-wing or left-wing, those are already getting passé. People are going, oh, geez, another one of those. Now, of course, if you leave it on for just a couple seconds, it shows that you watched it. But many people, they just scroll down and, they hear the first sentence, oh, another one of those videos, and they just go on. When it comes to something more authentic, then they are more likely to think, okay, what does this guy have to say? What's this woman's perspective on global warming? She disagrees with what most people think, or at least, according to what the media says. Why does she disagree? And they'll read it. Or if it's something on medical marijuana or any number of issues. The thing is, we've got to start using that psychology of disagreeing. Now, I'm going to say this. One more time, I'm going to say this. When Mitt Romney was running against Barack Obama, I saw many videos out there, just regular people, mostly young, because, they were the ones who knew how to do this. I think most people now really know how, if they try. But young people, and they're like, oh, Obama's great, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And then you look, okay, let's say your typed in subject was, why I'm supporting Barack Obama. And then you type in, why I'm supporting Mitt Romney. And you didn't see very many links show up. Because at that time, the Republicans were kind of the social media, that's YouTube, yeah, right. And you know what? Mitt Romney lost because of that. That's my opinion. He lost because of that. If he'd had his little staff out there working on getting people to record and get his message out there, I think he'd have won. But no. The social media got Barack Obama elected, both against John McCain in 2008 and then again in 2012. Now, 2016, like I said, love him or hate him, but Donald Trump knew how to use social media. I mean, or he already does. I mean, he's the Twitter god or whatever. And people now are even, I want to know what Trump's up to right now. They go to Twitter. They don't go to the New York Times or the Washington Post. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you've got, 71 years old guy, has been able to take on social media. But that's because he's been part of the media. Besides his business stuff, he's had his finger on the media machine. He knows how it works. He knows how to use it effectively. And I'll tell you something, you could learn from it. Okay? You could really learn from it. But try it out. Just give it a try. Go to YouTube and see how easy it is to make your own YouTube channel. Not hard at all. And then, like I said, either put your computer screen, there's a lot of apps you can download that allow you to film yourself and save your recordings. Beyond that, you can, if you want to, go out and spend a couple $100 or whatever it costs now to get yourself a little video camera. It's really easy. You just record something, plug it in just like an MP3 player, essentially, into your computer, download your file, and then upload it to YouTube. They have the thing that says upload video on YouTube. It's really simple, actually. I'm amazed by how many people, when you say you have a YouTube channel, are like, whoa, you got a YouTube channel. Well, it must be really complicated. No, it's not. It's not. It's easy. And I'm not trying to be an advertiser for YouTube right here. But it's not hard at all. And it's the same that Facebook was a few years ago when you'd say you were on Facebook. Like, oh, I'd consider going on there, but it looks too complicated. You know how many people I actually had to sit down and show how to do a Facebook account? And they're like, that's all? But you remember that? You remember that? Huh? Yeah, some of you are listening to this. They remember when you like didn't know how to set up a Facebook account. And now it's like, that's so easy. The thing you got to do is just take the step. If you want to have that Greek form of participatory democracy, that means you've got to get in there and you've got to actually do something. You've got to actually throw your opinions out there, let people read them, see them, whatever, discuss, debate. That's what it's all about. Not coming home, watching TV for 5 hours a night, and sitting there griping, I can't believe they're doing this, Marge, or Harriet, or George, or whatever. Okay? That doesn't do you any good. It's not reaching anyone, except for the people in your immediate audience, and half the time they've got their face buried on their iPhone playing some sort of game. So, if you want to reach out and make a difference, then it's easy to do. Just try it. Take that first step. And, again, you may not wind up being the next, I don't know, I'm not going to name names because it might make an unfair plug for them, but, you're not going to maybe wind up being the person that everyone's talking about at work or something like that. But you may still wind up in a situation in which you've reached people all over the world. Okay? And, I can tell you right now on my YouTube station, on my blog stuff, it really feels neat when you see people from, of course, Australia, Britain, United States, Canada are the biggies. But then you see that there's people watching your videos or looking at your blogs from places like Namibia or Syria. Or there's a lot of areas of Syria that still are intact. I've even had Burma places. People all over the world, and you don't know what kind of effect you can have. Little effect here, little effect there. You get someone thinking, and you know what? Your opinion counts. So try to share it. And be part of, this opportunity while it lasts. We don't know how long this kind of internet freedom will exist. So take advantage of it now. In fact, maybe the more people that are taking advantages of it, the less likely some politician is going to try taking it away. Anyway, I'd like to continue with the importance of speaking out. Now, we have to consider some very important facts here. First of all, the corporate media, by default, is where if we don't have information from other sources, from alternative media, from people making blogs and videos and sharing information, okay, then the corporate media, by default, will fill the gap. They make their money off advertising. They receive a great deal of, it's only like 6 corporations that control over 90% of all of the media in the United States. And that also has a far-reaching effect worldwide. And, of course, advertisers know that this reaches a lot of people. And they will continue going to the mainstream media to sell their products as long as the mainstream media still has a very large audience. So therefore, the only way to counter this, the only way to be able to make sure that people who may initially support you on a variety of issues don't suddenly, when election day comes, think, oh, well, I am a registered Democrat, so I guess I will have to vote for the Democrats. The only way to do this is to actually continue the process and not stop. And I've noticed something. There's not that many people out there really who are active when it comes to getting information out. Now you got to remember, social media, it's wonderful. It is fantastic, and you will reach many people if you effectively use social media. But within it are built-in algorithms which will limit your reach. So I'm not going to name anybody, name, but let's just say you have followers or friends or whatever that may number 1,000. You may only reach 5% of them, whether it's through an algorithm or whether it's just the fact that they're not going to even, bother to click on whatever link you send out. But that's still a large number of people that you've reached. You should not be discouraged. I have seen people that have gotten discouraged over this, and they've said, well, what's the use? I have all these people that have said they are connected to me and I can't reach them. Well, you're still reaching a large segment. And also, if you think about this, if you put out stuff like YouTube, and I said this in the first section, the only thing you need to do to reach lots of people is to reach out to lots of people. You don't need some fancy video gear. You don't even know how to edit. Okay, I very rarely edit anything I send out on YouTube. And whereas that may not have that same, Hollywood look about it, it still reaches many, many people. And on my YouTube station, just, I estimated, the last time I estimated, I get about 1,000 views a day. And that's 1,000 people. That's 1,000 people on a variety of subjects worldwide. You can go into the analytics and you can see that, it's reaching people in every country almost. There are some countries that block. But you're still reaching lots of people. And you should attempt to do this. Because information is the key. And you don't know what information will grab onto people. It's like, I hate to use this analogy, but it's like fishing bait. You throw the bait out there, and maybe the fish don't bite. And then you put something else on, throw it out, all of a sudden you get a fish. The point is, to this analogy, is you don't know what is going to actually get someone to be thinking and to reconsider their position in light of new information. It may be some little thing that you say that causes them to embark on their quest to find out more information. Some little thing that you may find inconsequential. That's just part of what you might review your video. Let's say you make a 20-minute video, you put it out there, and you're thinking, okay, well, it wasn't the best, but I don't know, let's see what happens. The thing that you may not consider that was important, it's the main, the main focus was, not what you wanted. It still could affect people in a positive way. I remember, I can't remember which Supreme Court justice who was he was very, very, very liberal, and he was inspired by Richard Nixon saying, you need to be out there and you need to have an effect on society. And inspired him to go along and continue. I'm sure Nixon was probably not too happy about that, but the thing is that it is real. You may, you may, ignite someone's fire and their passion. I'm not saying they're going to be against you. I'm just saying you may cause someone that you never will ever meet in your life to make a huge impact on people. And so I would really strongly encourage you to do this. And again, I'm going to really, really emphasize this. I mean, really emphasize this. Set up a blog. Okay, now, for the blog thing, let's just think about this for a moment. Just for a moment. At the very least, it'll improve your writing abilities and your research abilities. Always make sure that if you do say something controversial, you back it up. You put a source. Make sure that, you're not left out there on a limb. I see a lot of stuff out there, even in social media, that people put out that is, I would be very wary about making claims against individuals. I very rarely actually make, even political figures, I very rarely will zero in on a particular political figure. And the reason for that is, I think most of the time, it's concepts, philosophy, psychology. That is the thing that we're really striving to deal with, not some individual personality that happens to embrace a side that we don't agree with. And so, first, that protects you legally. If you happen to make a statement that may not be entirely defensible, may be true, but it may not be defendable if you were brought up on it. And very rarely it happens when it comes to public figures. But I just try to avoid that. I try to just deal with the concepts, because individuals come and go. They may be certain spokespeople for a particular stand, but if they disappeared, someone would fill their place. It's like when people think, oh, I just wish this congressman or congresswoman would just quit because they're so horrible. But let's say they represent a district that is so solid behind that viewpoint. It's not going to make a difference whether they are replaced, because they'll be replaced with someone that agrees with them. It's really the battleground states. And what I mean by battleground states also is battleground counties and cities and so forth. What used to be called marginal districts, where it can go 52-48 really easy. And, Trump, for instance, did very well, surprisingly, in many states that Republicans had kind of given up on, because he had a message. And a message is one that I think Republicans either ignored or they had given up on. And sometimes that might be, well, let's just say America's industrial base is gone. I have to say this. I was in a conversation yesterday with someone on Ray Kurzweil. He came up because this person was a musician. And we were talking about how things are changing when it comes to media. And he'd never heard of Ray Kurzweil. And I said, well, Kurzweil's this guy, this scientist and inventor and researcher. And he makes these predictions about the future. And we've talked about this before on some of the stuff I've dealt with transhumanism. And what he does is he takes it a step further. He says, well, if we have this, then we will have this develop. Because you need to have, for instance, if you're going to make a prediction about, let's say you were in the 1880s and you made a prediction that someday we'll have we'll have an engine that can propel a vehicle, a car, and that engine will be one in which you'll have a great deal of speed. Well, the thing is that if you know that the internal combustion engine is going to come along, and there were people that were theorizing about things like this even in the 1800s, What you then can say is, well, that will lead to people being able to live a great distance from their work. And then that will lead to people being able to, have this and this and this, and then this will lead to these other things. Most of the time, we think only in the terms of, someday we'll have cars, as people might have in the 19th century. But in politics, we also have to theorize, if this particular event takes place, this will follow. And if we take a look at such things as our position in the world when it comes to industry, let's just pretend that globalism. Now, I'm not saying all globalists. I've made a very clear distinction between the different types of globalism in previous shows. But let's just say that the globalists who think that everything should be, every country should deal with what it does best. It's called comparative advantage. It's the idea that, you can, why grow bananas in a hothouse in Sweden when you can buy them, where they grow naturally and very cheaply from Costa Rica. So that's what comparative advantage is. And there are some globalists who just say, maybe we don't need to manufacture things in the United States. Let's just go ahead and become a service and information economy. Well, then let's take that step. Okay, what if this happens, then what happens after that? Can America remain strong if it's just, flipping burgers, doing high-tech stuff, and, pet psychologist, that sort of thing? Will we be able to maintain the military that we have, maintain the economy that we have, and the diversity of economics and so forth? And I don't think so. And so, whereas it may be difficult for America to compete in the textile industry anymore, because you can make stuff so much more cheaply in countries like China, or it may not even be feasible because you can go ahead and do all this stuff with robots. The thing is, we need to strive to keep as much industry as we possibly can. We can't just say, well, let the Indonesians build this for us. Oh, well, let the Malaysians do this. Oh, let the people down in Honduras do this. No, because if we do that, then eventually we wind up with economy that will not be able to really be significant in the future. If, because I'll tell you something, people in those countries, Indonesia, China, whatever, they have plenty of smart people. They'll be able to create information-based economy very quickly. And, if things, develop the way they're going right now, everything economic is going to go towards Asia. Manufacturing, in my prediction is this, follow the money. It's going to go to places like Africa and so forth, because then they will start having, a economic renaissance very similar to what South Korea did, 30, 40 years ago, and China, 20 years ago. These things will develop in the world, but thinking that the Western world's going to stay on top and, just let these countries do this and these countries do that is basically foolhardy, because then, given 100 years from now, the Western countries will just be the has-been countries. We'll be similar when it comes to empires and stuff like that. We'll be similar to the Ottoman Empire and like the Spanish Empire and so forth. They grew weak. They couldn't compete against the other countries that were chipping away at them, and they collapsed. Okay? Or they just kind of ceased to mean anything anymore. And that is possible for us. There's nothing stagnant in the world. You either grow and develop, or you fall behind and deteriorate. There is no other way. You cannot maintain stagnation. So we need to make sure that we are developing and becoming more diverse. Yes, in our economics, we are going to develop a lot of automation. That's going to happen. There's no way to avoid it. But at the same time, we can't just throw our hands up in the air and say, well, let's just go ahead and just let everything go. And I think the message that we need to get out to people is one that the future is not a bad place. The future will be wonderful if we make it that way. And I see a certain sense of fatalism. It may be because of so many people have a kind of a fundamentalist Christian perspective that, well, the world's going to end sometime soon anyway. How do you know that? People maybe 100 years ago thought the world's going to end soon, and they're all dead of old age now. In fact, their grandkids are probably dead of old age. So the thing is, you cannot feel that way. You got to get information out. You need to be you need to be focused on the future and building a better future for yourselves, for your children, eventually your grandchildren. And if that means trying to learn how to use social media, how to use alternative media, how to get information out in order to compete against the multi-billion-dollar entertainment and media, and it's kind of a branch of the entertainment industry, industries, you've got to be out there disseminating information. There's no longer a monopoly on that information. You can get out there and you can affect people. And if 1,000 people all affected maybe 10 people apiece, that's 10,000 people. If 10,000 people could affect 10 people each, that's 100,000. You see how it grows. So, take part. Use this wonderful opportunity and reach people, because, the future's for the people who show up. And it's also for, the future is what we build of it. A year from now, you could still be where you're at now, or you could have advanced and had major impact. So think about this for a moment, and ponder it, and then go do something about it. Anyway, that's all the time we have. I hope you'll be back next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Take care now.
Bye.